I have a kind of a question, because you see so much in the media, like, the classic psychologist, like kind of a couch like this, somebody
mercy.
laying back and,
Right.
telling their story.
They have a notebook.
But why just the act of verbalizing it, does that help so much?
Now, if we're in a cycle, there is a false cycle of just talking, talk therapy. That's not a cycle that you want to get into.
Gotcha.
All they want you to do is talk and talk and talk and talk. You can write that stuff out, right? It'll do the same effect, but it's much more, you want someone to help you to make the connection in your life. The learning aspect is invaluable.
Yeah.
LED Live.
With mental health issues on the rise, today we're going to talk about understanding your mental health, and we have a special guest, Dr. Dana Philisaint. Thank you for coming on the show with us.
I'm so excited to be here. This is awesome.
We've been trying to connect for a while, and thank you for your patience, but this is a topic that we are seeing more and more of, and we've done a couple of pieces on this, but I'm really excited to hear some of the tools, and from what I understand we're going to get into if you can kind of understand how or what triggers this, you can be able to deal with it, right?
That's right. So understanding the whole cycle actually give us a whole picture. I think sometimes we tackle this topic of mental health in isolated cases, right? Depression, or here's anxiety, or here's fear, or here's trauma. But what is the whole picture, right? If it's about the brain, so it's got to start from somewhere. Where did it start from, and how? Where can we go with that to actually help people to understand how their mind actually is working?
Now, give us a little bit of your background. You work in like a clinical setting.
That's right. So we have a center downtown Somerville, Georgia, called Mind Care. And we also have contracts that we do with the county. So we go to schools, we do some assessments there, we do some presentations in various locations. So we also have written some curriculums for mental health for various youth programs and so forth. So we're really diving into helping people to understand that the Lord actually has a method of dealing with mental health.
I love it that you're calling it mind care, because you think about people take care of their body. People will take care of all kinds of things.
That's right.
But you don't really hear about people taking care of your mind as much. So I'm excited to dive into this topic.
Good deal. So understand the mental health cycle. So this is how we can see the whole picture. There's actually a cycle to understanding this. There was a story that reminded me of how I actually went into this field and why it is that we do what we do. But there was a lady, she came into our office. This was my last client of the day. I was tired, I'm not gonna lie. But she came in with a 12-year-old daughter, actually it was a son, and she started, she didn't even smile or anything. She was like, look, help me. This child right here, I have had it. He's stealing, lying, and cursing, and he just now got kicked out of school. I don't know what to do. I heard that you're a psychologist, change him. I'm like, change him? Oh wow, I wish I had that kind of power. But wow, let's see what's going on. And so the kid was sitting there, he didn't say a thing. And usually when we deal with children, and we like the parents to be there, because obviously they learn, they're seeing something, something is happening to them to get to that point. And so this was one of those cases I questioned if I should have had the parent in there, just how negative she was about her her son. But it brings a different topic for us is, can we really change people? Can we really get to the mind and say, you're no longer depressed? Is that what we do? Is that what we're about when we hear the word psychology? Do we do, some kind of magic to change people's mind? And the answer is actually no, we don't, right?
There's no factory reset?
There is no, reset button. But what we can do is give people the right tools and the right education and lead them to the right source that can actually change a person. And so, one of the really cool quote things that I've read along the years was a book called Mind, Character, and Personality. Have you heard of those books?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And page 8, it says, great wisdom is needed in dealing with diseases caused through the mind. And then she continues to say, understanding the mind and human nature aids in the work of salvation. And lastly, in order to lead souls to Jesus, there must be a knowledge of human nature and a study of human mind. So I think what it is we need to spend a lot more time understanding the human mind so that we can actually get the whole picture across on how to help people.
Right, because there's all kinds of influences in our world, and a lot of these things are influencing your mind.
That's right.
And it seems like there's not a lot of focus on the mechanics of why is this happening, and it's like we put all this evil media out into the world, but then nobody questions like, what is this doing to your brain?
That's right. A lot of our information sometimes we get from modern psychology, how it started, right? We had individuals trying to answer questions like these, who am I? What is life? What is God? What is a thought? Where is the mind? What is the soul? Is the soul the self? What is memory, and how do you know? This is how psychology got started. People were trying to understand these questions, and so they came up with various theories, right? And a lot of us have bought into a lot of these theories. You hear of Freudian theory, you heard of Maslow theory, trying to understand this concept. But what the problem is, they fell short of understanding what the creator have created, designed our minds to be. And of course, they don't address the topic of sin. They don't address how salvation can be brought about, and they definitely does not understand the concept of the gospel. And so they missed out a lot of that basic and fundamental information that we need to understand the mind. And so people are struggling to know who they are as a result. I used to live in Japan. I was telling you guys that earlier, and one of the things, I don't know if I can play that from here. I might have to play from here. But one of the things that was really popular there is anime.
Oh,
right?
yes.
And cosplay. I don't know if you guys heard about cosplay, but there are people who go into the world of their, anime character, fantasy character, where they would actually go and even get surgery done to look like the character that they so adore and love. And
like the Comic-Con kind of
it's
type
not
of
just
thing.
a one-day Halloween. That's what
Halloween. Yeah.
It's not a one-day Halloween thing. This
Yeah.
is just an everyday. This is who I am. Trying to figure out who I am in this world. And again, they don't know who they are. And the risk of not knowing who you are is very dangerous.
Yeah.
I had a young lady that came to my office. I used to work for the military up in Japan. And one of the things is, whenever they had a suicidal thought, they would have to talk to someone to find out what the risk level of their suicidal is, and then see if they needed to, go to the hospital to come up with a plan for them. And this young lady, she was about 15 years old, and she was escorted to the office, and she sat down. I was asking her all these questions, and she didn't want to really answer anything, but finally she goes, "What's the point?" I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "Well, I get good grades, I'll go to school, I'll eventually have a career, I'll get married probably and have a house, and then I die. So if that's the point, I might as well just get to the end." I said, whoa.
Yeah.
That's a different mindset. I mean, when you don't understand that there is actually a purpose for your existence.
Right. Or there's something beyond.
There's something beyond.
There's no hope if it's like, this is it, and you have a bad existence
That's
here.
right.
That's sad.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So the choice is always said to us, in the Bible, choose life. Choose life. That's what Deuteronomy tells us, to choose life. Just some statistics for you guys and why this is so important. In 2019, the CDC did a research and seen what is the mindset of high schoolers right now when it comes to depression and anxiety and those kinds of things. They found out that almost 37% of every high school student was saying that they were depressed. Okay?
Now, is this something that we're just recognizing, or we have more data or more tools, or is it actually like these numbers are getting astronomically
increasing? This is 2019, so this is before the pandemic. So now, even with the pandemic, it's actually gotten even higher than
Do they do this annually?
They typically do it when they do the surveys, that they go around and do and find out what's going on in the schools. So it's not yearly, unfortunately. So usually around every 4 or 3 years, whenever they feel like there's a need to do it, they're doing. But the last one that they did was 2019.
I'm sure we're going to unpack a little bit of this, because I have this question mark of why. What's the cause of all this?
That's the reason.
I know media. We've studied media quite extensively in the past few years, and when we were doing a documentary about social media, one of the things that kind of popped out was that there was this sort of link that the more that they played with it, the more depression they actually would experience. And even so, I've seen interviews of there's kind of like like a tech psychologist in the area of Silicon Valley. His name is Jero, and he's kind of a real crazy looking guy.
And he said, "Don't go there."
Yeah, well, he was literally like saying, like, companies know this data. This is not something that they're like unaware. They know that we're putting this kind of technology out and it's causing this kind of a result.
That's right. And I can give you a little bit of information even now, just to let you know that the temptation is really strong. The temptation out there to know, to get to, be part of something that's hype and new is very strong. And addiction that comes with it is also, that's what keeps us in for a long time, unfortunately. So even with those students, they were seeing that almost 19% of them were saying that they seriously are considering suicide.
Man.
Almost 19. And then almost 16 have actually had a plan designed for them to commit suicide. Almost 9% have attempted, 2.5 have been injured as a result of it. Now, they're not telling you the number of students that's actually been, have committed suicide and so forth, but it's good to know where we at so that we can actually help those that are still here,
Absolutely.
right? And so you wonder, what is it like in the church then, right?
Yeah.
If we're talking about, high school, and this is like high school nationwide, this is Christian, non-Christian, and so forth. How about in the church? There was a survey that was done in the churches to see what is their idea about mental health and where we at with that in the churches. Some 47% said that they do not feel supported right now when it comes to their own mental health in the church.
Wow.
Another 35% said that they believe that prayer and Bible will help them. Okay. Now, for some, you might say, well, that's not a large number. For some, it's like, well, at least 35%, right?
Yeah.
However you see it, it's still, 35%.
When you see this at a church setting, it should be 99%. Like maybe there's a few that don't
35.
believe it.
And then some 4% said that out of all the individuals that they know that have committed suicide, only 4% said that they were aware that they had some issues, that individual had some issues. And then some 32% said that they know someone in the church, their family members, that have committed suicide. Another 65% said, I wish we would talk more about this suicidal thing or this mental health thing, and it's not being discussed as it should be in the church. And then overall, they asked all the churches, only 27% said that they actually have a plan to help people in the church. And then, 49% of pastors actually admitted this is not a topic that they talk about in the church.
Oh yeah. I don't know if I've ever heard a sermon on it.
There you go.
Never.
There you go. So 49% said they have never.
In our community, we just had a young child. He was, teenager age, and he ended his life, and it was a hard thing for a lot of this community around us here, and I'm sure it's a difficult thing to navigate. Do you want to talk about it? I'm sure if you have a family, you don't want to talk about it. I mean, what do you do in that kind of a situation?
That's right.
Is it best to kind of, begin conversation?
Yes,
I mean, I'm sure it's a hard thing.
Absolutely. Talk about it, because the thing is, someone is already thinking about it. Right? And so if we can talk about it, at least they have now a chance to unravel some of the things that they're feeling inside and don't feel so much in isolation in their minds.
Right.
And then this is an interesting quote too, that percentage, 23% of pastors themselves admit that they themselves are struggling with mental health.
Wow.
Right? So this is why, when we're talking about why to lead a person to Jesus, it's so important to understand the human nature, not only that, but also the study of the human mind. So we need to do a lot more of studying, and let's study this mind that God has given us. And I remember when I was studying just that, the thought came to me that everything comes in cycles, right? If you think about, there's a water cycle, right? And then we study that in science class. There's the eco cycle, and then there's the plant life cycle. Everything comes in cycle. How about learning? Even learning has a cycle, right? If you ever read the book of Proverbs, that's a powerful book and wonderful book with instructions and so forth, but you'll constantly see 4 words constantly popping up. The words of instruction, wisdom, understanding, knowledge, right? All those. At first, you might think it's the same thing, but it's actually not.
Interesting.
What I found through my study of Proverbs was instruction is, when you're listening to something, if you're watching anything, you're being instructed on something. Wisdom then tells us, this is something I want to take in. This is meaningful. I think it's wise for me to take this instruction in, right? Understanding is when you're able to not only take this in, but able to see and show that you understand. You apply it. So there's an application format that comes with that, the information that you gathered. And knowledge now is your ability to take this information and then go out and share it, right? So it's not the same thing. So while you see, there's wisdom, not everybody gained wisdom. We can gain, your parents probably were trying to instruct you, right? But you didn't want to take everything in, right? So you weren't wise and to follow the plans that your parents taught you, or understanding. You never demonstrated that you understood anything, right? Or if you're in school, you're not really applying anything that you learned, so you didn't show that you understood it. And of course, a lot of us are not going out and teaching or sharing the things that we know. So that's knowledge. So we don't have that knowledge to share. So that's the cycle of learning.
I love it that God designed in witnessing the opportunity to share with other people, because I think that is one of the things that really helps it sink into us.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, and I mean, I've tried to do this with my kids, like just teaching them how to cook. Sometimes my kids will be like, "Dad, make me this, make me that," and I was like, "Well, there's the pan, and I'll stand over you and help you learn how to do it," because it's much more powerful if he learns how to do it, and then all of a sudden like he'll enjoy that skill the rest of his life.
That's right.
But if I constantly do it for him,
he will never
do it. So to teach somebody something.
That's right.
Are there any groups where, like for example, the high school students, I'm backing up a little bit, where it's maybe a sub-demographic that depression is higher? Like for example, we out of all the kids, we noticed that the ones from a single family home, or maybe there's a particular ethnic group, or a financial demographic, or something like that, or maybe something unexpected, like it was like 80% of them were like honor roll students or something.
Right.
Are there any sub-demographics where it's higher, where you see spikes?
Good question. So, I don't know the answer to that. I haven't seen any literature that shows particular groups as higher or than the other, but what we're seeing overall is they're all increasing. It doesn't matter. One thing that I have seen and have noticed is that in poorer country, kids tend to be more happy. That I have noticed.
This is true. I mean, it is really fascinating. My family and I, we took a mission trip to Africa this last year, and you play with these little kids who have nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely nothing. These we went to an orphanage, and the girls had a little metal box at the end of their metal bed, and all the contents of everything they owned was in this little box. And they looked like they were totally fine.
I think one of the main reasons, I believe, is that they're less tempted. There's less temptation. They don't have the means to go and be tempted with, name it, alcohol or whatever, the video games.
And with temptation, I'm sure then comes guilt and remorse.
You're starting to see it. You're starting to see it. Yes, that's exactly it. There's some, a good example of these words being in Proverbs: "Give instruction to a wise man, and he will be wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding." So that's a really good Proverbs to see that these 3 or 4 words are actually not the same thing. And take some time to study for yourself, and you'll see. So this is what I have seen, that there's actually a cycle to mental health. So and I'm going to break it down a little bit more, but there's experiences that people have. With these experiences, I found that a lot of them are tempted based on what they're thinking, their words, their action, and the habits that follow. If it is negative, then they're more likely to be tempted in something. If it's positive, they're less likely to fall into that same temptation. And then with that, it changes the whole person, and then you get character, right? So let's break it down a little bit more. So the first is understand, what is mental illness? What is mental illness? We hear about it all the time, but what exactly is it? So it's defined according to the American Psychological Association as health conditions that involve changes in one's thinking, in one's emotions, their behavior. So there are changes that are taking place. So that mom was actually correct, that there are changes that were taking place in her son's life. By the way, some more information about this kid. he was left in a home by his biological mom that was using drugs. So this was actually his stepmom that brought him in. Oh, wow. And he was left there for over 12 days on his own when he was 1.
Oh.
Okay. So was there trauma there before?
Yeah.
There was something happening, and no one has discussed, because who did he talk to? No one has ever discussed these things with him, but he feels, or they believe that now that he has a great home, that's not his issue. That has nothing to do with his issue, right? Yeah. So there are always some kind of event that takes place that we need to unravel at times. Right. And is that what's occurring right now in his life, or does he need to talk about something that no one is listening or hearing him talk about? So all of that to say is that's also that it's associated with distress or a problem functioning in the social and work and family environment. Another factor that we need to understand is the word character. What is character? Character is how, your habits, your motives, your thoughts, and everything that makes you who you are. So your emotions, everything about you creates your character.
The only thing you're taking to heaven
is your character.
Is your character.
Is your character. So based on the definition that I told you earlier about mental illness, I'm going to change the definition just slightly and put the word character there, okay? So mental illness is actually a health condition that involves changes in our character.
Interesting.
Right? Because it's all about your thinking,
kind of brings a whole
your emotions.
Context to it.
It does. It really, truly does. And why is character, this whole thing, so important? Just like you mentioned, right? We're told that every act of life, however unimportant, has its influence in forming the character. Everything that you do influences the character.
I've always heard of it as character broken down into thoughts and feelings, right? It's your thoughts and feelings. And I mean, music is made up of like literally character, thoughts and feelings, right? The feelings is the emotional piece or the music aspect, and then the thoughts are the words that are attached with that.
That's right.
And I mean, movies do that. They mess with your feelings, but they're a bunch of words that they're putting together. So there's a lot of things in life that we have that influence this aspect of our being. But
yeah, absolutely. So we're told also that, good character is very precious. It's the most precious thing that you can think of. If you think about it this way, when you go to an interview, the first thing they want you to do is give them some references. I need some references. I need some recommendation letters from you so we can hear what someone else is saying about you. Even if you're going to buy a car or a house or a loan, they all said, I need references. We need to know something about you that we can trust, right? So that's all about your character. People are checking to see, who is this person? What character do you have? Do you have a solid character?
Kind of like what they're doing in China, right? Character, social numbers.
Mercy.
Not really.
The harvest of life, we're told, is character. It is that determine our destiny, both for this life and the life to come. Character does not come by chance. No. It does not come by chance. To a great extent, everyone is the architect of his own character, and I love that.
That's interesting.
Because if you are the one that can create or design the character that you have, that means there's something that you need to know of how to go about doing it, right? So other things to keep in mind, that defective character is not something that just happens. It does not just happen.
And what I think is neat too is God has intended the creation to be able to heal, right? I mean, he's built the system. It can be broken in many times, like this young boy that 1 year old, I can't even imagine. The trauma that he went through, I'm sure, is programmed that poor child into a world of problems and things like this. But is it reversible?
Good question. I believe that God can change anything and anyone.
Amen.
I really do. I do. I think, however, though, there are things that happen to us that we can use, that he can use to impact a greater number of people. So your story, you can use your story to turn it to some kind of testimony that others might want to be attracted to God, right? So he allowed things for various reasons, right? And the 1 year old, he had nothing to do with anything at that age. And so, how should his mind interpret the event? And that's what we're going to learn too, is should we interpret events? Because this thing called life ain't easy. And I'm saying it just like that. It's not easy. So we want to make sure that we don't portray that a Christian life is easy. It's not.
Yeah.
It is not easy. I remember I was having a conversation with my husband a while back. You know, a lot of time we put a lot of praise and, you know, we want to hear testimonies about people who've left the church and then they've come back and it's like powerful. It is powerful. But you know what else is powerful? When a young person can stay in the church.
Yeah. Amen.
That's powerful.
Amen.
Because the temptations and the struggles are real.
I'm actually always impressed by that. Speaking with young people, sometimes, you know, we'll get into a conversation about drinking or drugs or something like this. And every once in a while, when I have some young child come by and say, I'm never engaged in that, I'm always like,
How
wow.
did you not do that?
I mean, that's
Right.
impressive to me. I think the other way is way more
Easier, yeah.
It's like the, you know, most common story.
Exactly.
That's a unique story
It
that
is.
somebody doesn't
It
engage
is.
in that activity.
It is, absolutely. And I think sometimes we need to understand just, you know, trying to stay in that narrow path, you know, need to be celebrated in a sense, because we need to know how you're able to do that. When everybody else is falling and you have not fell, how did you resist all of the temptation that came your way? Because they are going to come. They came, I'm sure, you know. So character is, it is said, is formed by hard, stern battle with the self, with self, right? So getting back to this idea of the cycle, you know, I remember reading books like Christ Object Lesson, and again, Mind, Character, and Personality, and Ministry of Healing, and trying to decide and understand what is character. And we saw there in those books as well, character is makeup from your action, the habits, the thoughts, and the feelings. Those things make up your character. And then there's something that happens called experiences of life. When these things happen, it is then up to us, every individual, should I have a thought, a word, or action, or habit that will become negative? Or should I take that same experience and have a word, an action, or habits, and so forth that is positive? And depend on the track that you take will determine where your mindset go. Okay? So
I got a biblical example for you for that. Joseph.
Yep.
I mean, we're talking, this is a guy that
Exactly it.
sold by his family members, kicked down, lied, and he remained to say, I'm not going to let this change my character.
That's right.
I'm going to
That's exactly
remain integrity, and look at, God honored that and made him the second in command in the entire world.
Absolutely. And because of that, you know, when a person goes towards the positive mindset, even regardless of the experience, and i.e. said trauma, even regardless of the trauma that person experienced, they are more hopeful, they have more courage, their faith increases, and then so they're more likely to have sympathy towards others, and then you know, based on those quotes as well, their health increases, and that prolongs life. Now, when the other side as well, you were going to say something too.
Well, health increasing, you mean when you have positive thoughts, it physically has
Yes.
a result on us. So my mom used to have this like funny little phrase that when we would start these negative thoughts or something, she would say, "Stop that stinking thinking," and she would tell us, like, you know, those thoughts can actually cause us to, you know, be sick or something.
That's right. That's right. There's research that's actually backing that up. Big time. Big time.
What's the difference though, or what's the line with actually avoiding your problem and then being positive about it?
That's a good question.
That's a very good question. So I don't think you're called to avoid your problem. You're told that God is the solution to the problem, right? And so it's identifying and going through the problem is actually a healing process within itself, and it's a growth process. And so a lot of times people go, you know, around, and so the mind's like, what do you want me to do with this one? You know, I can't avoid it. It's still there. This happened to me for real, right? And so we're not talking about this. We're not talking about going around it, and that causes more heartaches than anything. It's about going through the process. God says, let's take me through the fire with you, right? And so it's not avoiding and start thinking about positive. Oh, no, I'm not going to think about this. It's dealing with it. How do you want me to deal with it? Sometimes positive things come out of a trauma, right? People will write wonderful books or movies or,
to help someone
just
else.
help someone else, a program as a result of what they've gone through. Or even on a smaller scale, they know how to parent much better because their parents were horrible parents, right? And so there are things that God wants us to learn, and it's always about learning. It's always been about learning. Mental health, to really understand trauma and everything else in between is, what is the lesson? Because there is a lesson.
Yeah.
There is a lesson. Not I deserve it. It's not that. And that's a lot of time, that's the problem. They start taking it in so personal, like, why this has happened to me? And, I am ugly, or I'm worthless. And all those, self-talk of woe it is to be me. That's the negative thing that we want to get out of because all those are lies.
Yeah.
Every last one of all those things are lies. No experience create those things. You accepted those lies. And so those lies are just that. If they're lies, what is the truth? Right?
You are invaluable.
That's right.
There's no number you can put on your worth.
it.
And I
That's
mean, Jesus would have
exactly
died for you.
Exactly.
I have a kind of a question, because you see so much in the media, like, the classic psychologist, like kind of a couch like this, somebody
mercy.
laying back and,
Right.
telling their story.
They have a notebook.
But why just the act of verbalizing it, does that help so much?
Now, if we're in a cycle, there is a false cycle of just talking, talk therapy. That's not a cycle that you want to get into.
Gotcha.
Okay, when you share, and it's okay to share, and I'm perfectly fine with people sharing. It's not just next week. Did you talk? What are you thinking about? This talk therapy is not what God wants us to be about. It's about the lesson. It's about the learning process. And so if you're going to a counselor and all they have you do, and I have seen it because I've gone to counselors myself, right? All they want you to do is talk and talk and talk and talk. You can write that stuff out, right? It'll do the same effect. But it's much more, you want someone to help you to make the connection in your life. The learning aspect is invaluable, right? And so how can you take that information and create something grander? What does God want you to see and understand about sin, about Him, about the gospel message that can do phenomenal in your life as a result, regardless of the experiences that you've had? So it gets bigger than just, let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. If that's what you're going for, beware.
So no rant sessions every time.
Please don't.
I'll be a listening ear. I'll charge half.
And again, I'm not saying it's a bad thing to go and share. And I have heard people say, don't go sharing your problems with people. There are people who are holding things in their heart. If
Need to
only
get it
they
out.
will just share it with someone, and God will present to you, this is the person that you should share it with, right? And it's okay to do that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Now, if you believe that this person is your God, or like this mom, change her, change him, that's a whole different concept. We're not God. We are not God, and we should never take the place of God. So we can tell people and share with them, pray.
Right.
That's where you share all of that detail and as much as you want and whatever else in between. And God will connect you to people that will help you either make connection, see things in a different way, and that's a healing process. And sometimes you're stuck in just one way of thinking that you can't see any way out or any way else than the way that you've been thinking, or even behaving in such a way. If you start getting into addictions, those kinds of things, please seek out help.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You had a question?
No, I'm just mulling something over, but I'll bring it out maybe in a little bit.
Yeah.
I do just want to ask, so do you think there is a place in the church so there's this mindset that you can't have, like if you're struggling with mental health and you don't believe in Jesus enough. What do you think about that? Because if we do believe that Jesus does have ultimate power, and in the Bible we just see people being completely transformed,
Right.
what does it say about the person who is continuing to
That's
struggle,
right.
or who has to, let's say they go through depression, they have to put in a lot of effort. They have to make sure that they, have make that space or energy in their
Right.
schedule to spend time with God, and then to make sure they exercise, but it's a burden the whole way through.
That's right.
How do you?
Good question. Good
Yeah.
question. So one other thing too we had to understand is our mind is housed in our brain. right? And so the brain is an organ, just like your heart and just like your lungs and everything else. And sometimes there's a default in that, right? And so with that said, it's not a shameful thing if the pain is in there. And so there's ways of going about it, just like there's a way of going about it if you have a heart problem, if you have a lung problem. It may not necessarily be medication, all those kinds of things, because there are always natural ways of going about things as well, right? And so whatever path that the Lord is taking you to get that healing, seek him out to see, Lord, what do you want me to do? Should I share? Should I not share? Sometimes it's not necessary to go and share. I tell you that all the time. I tell people that all the time. Just because something's coming to your mind doesn't mean automatically, I need to go see a psychologist. I need to go see a counselor. And it's kind of weird coming from a psychologist saying that, right? But it's not necessary to always go seek out, when God says, I have the solution for this particular one, or this is the situation, and God can show you what that situation is. So it's really being connected with God in such a way that he can show you, this is what I want you to do with this. And it might be, go talk to someone, because you can't hear him clearly, and that happens. Yeah. That absolutely happens. When you're so sometimes depressed, your mind cannot see anything else than what it's seeing, right? And somebody might be able to lead you in a different path that you didn't even think. Oh, wow, okay, now I can see just a little bit clearer. Okay.
Just listening to you talk, it's like I can't imagine not having the God element as a part of the help solution. I know that there's a lot of people who don't believe in God and that there's all these ways that you can help solve this, but it's like you just cut straight to the guy who made the hardware.
And that's the bottom line. We're creative beings. We really are. And that's when you really understand the mind. Yeah. You really truly can see that there are things that you have absolutely no control over unless you turn it over to him.
Yeah.
I think it's comforting to know that, even if it's not safe or maybe not wise to share with somebody else, you can always share with God.
Absolutely.
You can always go to God. Pour your heart out, and tell him anything. So there's always, there's always at least one person you can share with.
Absolutely.
Every time.
Absolutely.
But I was just sitting here thinking about, if you're coming from a Christian worldview, it's kind of fascinating to think that all of God's thoughts are right. And the reason we're kind of in this mess in the first place is because we can choose our own thoughts, and because there was a rebellion in heaven, it started with incorrect thinking, like choosing the wrong thoughts.
And that's why the battle remains right there. The battle of the mind, we're told, right? That's the whole thing. It's where there's a battle in our mind, and it is that same battle that started from the very beginning. God wants our mind, and so does the enemy. Yeah. He really, really does want your mind.
Is it Corinthians that talks about bringing every thought into captivity of Christ?
That's right.
I mean, that's just like the ultimate picture of is every one of my thoughts subject to God's thinking?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask too, because I know that this is also something controversial in the church, is if someone takes medication for their health, is that something that shows a lack of faith?
That's a very good question. I think God deal with us where we are at. And sometimes I will say that person probably need that. If this is where they're at and God wants to reach them there, and then there are other people, they're at the level or so forth where they say, this is not what I want, and God can reach them there too. Right? I think we need to leave that judgmental part out. And once we do that, God can do his work so much better than we can, right? There's a lot of controversy, of course, the medication because of the side effects, but that's for every medication.
Right.
So let's not tackle one and not deal with the others. Right. So if we're talking medication, let's not talk about just one kind of medication. Let's talk about all the medications. All right. So you're not taking any medications at all, right?
Even skincare has everything has, and we openly take it.
Yeah, God reached us where we're at. And we got to remember that. And so where that person is may not be where you're at. And that's okay. Yeah. That is absolutely okay. So good questions. Yeah, good questions. I love that. So what are these experiences? One of the things that's really hyped right now is the word trauma. You guys hear trauma everywhere, right? Trauma. Yeah. And then there's a definition for trauma. It's an emotional response to terrible events and they give the examples of accident, abuse, neglect, rape, whatever else in between. But one of the things I can tell you that trauma could be anything. It really can be anything for anybody. What might be traumatic for you might not be traumatic for someone else, right? Bullying right now is like very traumatic for a lot of kids. I don't know any kid that wasn't bullied, to be honest with you. Right. But that's a whole different topic for a whole different, time. But, that could be traumatic for them, but it wasn't traumatic for you. Why is that? Okay? So let's not judge someone's trauma. Let's identify, okay, they were traumatized. Let's accept the fact that they were traumatized. If we start going there, and that's why I like dealing with trauma, because it looks different for everyone. And it leaves room for all of us to be accepting of whatever the problems that they have, and so that they can present what their traumas are, and still understand and see that that their trauma is what's actually impacting them. Okay.
Do you think that how it affects people also stems from their upbringing? Because I can imagine, let's say you have someone who experienced emotional neglect or whatever when they were younger in the home, and so when they go out into the world and you hear things like, "Oh, you're stupid," or "You're dumb," or anything, "You're ugly," and you believe it, versus someone who grew up in a more secured home and then they have someone bullying them and they think, "Well, that's not who I am. I don't care what you say," and go about their life. Do you think that stems from those first 5 years in the home?
Absolutely. You remember we talked about the cycle of learning? It applies even for negatives, right? So the instructions that we were given at any age, we could take that and say, that's for me, right? And so we can start living our life in such a way that we apply the very negative thing that someone had told us about ourselves. And then that cycle still continues, because now you're treating your own children the same way. So it's that same cycle. It's a cycle of learning, whether it be positive or negative. You can still apply where, it just continues, that same negative cycle, unfortunately. Right?
On the positive side, especially raising children, giving them the love and nurture from a parent perspective, especially a father to a daughter, right? She grows up with I am valued and I am loved.
Absolutely.
Whereas if she didn't have that, there might be that hole, so it's
looks for it.
That's right. She does look for it. At the same time, too, there's that aspect of wisdom. I have seen parents raise, they're the very best to raise their children. We gave them everything that they needed, the wisdom, the Bible, everything. Homeschool, if you want to call that the ultimate, education. At the same time, those kids still fall away. Why is that?
Right? It's sin.
Well, it's sin, but they also have a choice. So there's a choice factor that even still, that even if you were raised in a horrible home, that you can still have the choice and say, no, that's not what I want. So I think that sometimes people forget there's a learning aspect and there's that wisdom. Is this something that I want? I think a lot of times people don't take time to analyze and study. We're told that self-assessment is a good thing. Assess yourself. Think about the things that you're thinking. What are you thinking? What is your mind set on? So that you can actually go above or change, those kinds of factors as well.
So would you say, trauma, just like people have physical pain and you cannot experience somebody else's physical pain, trauma's like that mental injury that you experience pain from, and so in the same way you can't compare, you don't know what somebody else is going through. Like I have one child, you would think every time something happens to him, he's dying, It's just like his pain is so great, at least to him, it's so great and unbearable.
That's right.
That nobody can understand him, and you just think, wow, it's so over the top every time. He's a very sensitive person. Whereas I have other children, it's like, it's not that big a deal. They're not as sensitive, So if they get, fall down and hit their knee, it's like, that's life.
It's like, hey, you're bleeding. Oh, yeah.
It is. It's very personal. But what I really like is, I don't know if you ever study Isaiah 53, right? God, they can always relate to God because he says, like, I've experienced all of it, right? And so you point that person to the right source, they can start seeing, okay, yeah, you can't relate to me at all. And that's where the gospel message comes in so helpful and handy to anyone, right? You may not understand it. I may not understand because I did not go through that trauma that you're seeing, that you've defined. but someone has. Someone has. And so that you can, again, start connecting them to that source.
I think that's interesting because God does have different ways that he describes how he can relate to us. And I know, like, for me, the biggest thing is friend.
Yeah.
And for other people, it could be father. For some people,
Right.
it could be like, you know, people say like, you're the son of a king or you're the daughter of a king.
Right.
For me, I've never been royalty. I am not in a culture that deals like, when people tell me that, I'm like, okay, I don't care about that. I don't even want, you know? So it's like, but for someone who may be like, I don't know, in India and they deal with
Right.
caste
They
systems, that is
understand, right?
super like relatable, and that's something that's like, wow, I have this much value. So I love that God does have these different ways that he can connect
with
to
the-
us. Yeah.
You know, oftentimes, again, because of those negative thoughts, the words and the action that are negative, the anxiety and so forth comes about, and the mind start becoming depressed. And so we have what's called mild depression. You've heard of mild depression. It's just a mild depression where, you know, the person is feeling irritable, very angry, hopelessness comes in, and feeling of guilt, distress, self-loathing a lot of time comes in. The activities that they used to like, they start, you know, not liking it anymore. So you can kind of see their behaviors or their characters start changing.
Doesn't everybody experience this at some point, though?
That is possibly
I mean,
true.
what would you say would be the percentage of people that deal with or have at least some level of
It has
depression?
been said, and there's research that shows that at some point of your life, 90% of the people will experience depression.
Has to be.
Yeah. So you know, that is the truth. That is the truth. However, it can go towards moderate depression or even severe depression,
Or
where
short-lived,
you know,
yeah.
or very. And the problem though is if it's not addressed, if you just kind of stay in that level and then or you get deeper into your depression, which has happened, it can actually cripple a person where they're not even going to work anymore. They're not waking up in the morning anymore. So then you're talking about a serious case of depression where they're so engulfed in their minds about everything in their lives that is so negative that, you know, suicidal thoughts start coming in. And then it becomes really problematic. We're told that when it comes to suicide, the World Health Organization estimated that some 800,000 people commit suicide every year.
Oh, wow.
In the world.
So
800,000.
So let me ask you this, because, you know, we may have a lot of young people that watch our channel or something, or parents that have young children. Do you need to check in with your children?
Absolutely, every day.
I mean, like, I've never had a conversation with my child like, hey, have you ever considered suicide? Like,
I think building that trust is important and showing interest in their life.
It is. And you know, honestly, the more, there are times, and I'm going to say that for some parents that I actually know whose their children have committed suicide, that is one of the hardest things that parents have to deal with.
I
you know,
bet.
and it is not the parents' fault at all. I want to make sure that they understand that every single day the enemy is throwing temptations and things at your children. Every single day, his aim is to take the kids out, your children out, because they're a powerful weapon in this battle, right? And so that's his aim. And so it is not the parents' fault, but oftentimes the children's mind can be so caught up in whatever it is for a long time or even a short time that the parents didn't even get a chance to catch it. Right, and then so of course, unfortunately, you know, these young lives were cut too short. Right, so whatever we can do now, you know, even those individuals, they have a powerful tool now that they can even use to go and help other parents. Beware, look, I did not know.
Yep.
So that's another way of looking at it. Now, you can use that trauma to go about helping as many people as possible, because the enemy does not want you to do that.
Yeah. See, I think that this should be talked about in schools. It should be talked about in churches. It should be talked about with young people. Like, I just don't think we put enough emphasis on understanding this. And there's such a stigma against it. If somebody's depressed or, you know, struggling or whatever, and then it's just kind of like, okay, well, you know, don't give me that contagious, thing over there.
No, it's not contagious at all.
Yeah, I think that's a bad way to deal with it.
It's actually the second leading cause of death between the ages of kids 15 to 29.
Wow.
Second leading cause.
Okay, maybe I'll get canceled for saying this, but I know that social media is very influential, and what we watch does impact us, and we all want this sense of belonging and community. Do you think, because I feel like I've seen this, where depression is romanticized. And so you could have people who are not really depressed, but they just kind of carry on that depressed aesthetic because it's just what's cool, it's what's in, it's what makes you the cool person. You create the cool art or the cool music, and it just gives you this whole
edge.
Different, it gives you an edge. And I feel like I'm seeing that all throughout the culture.
Yeah.
Is that?
It is a thing. It is definitely a thing. Actually, I remember there was a school that I was working in, I won't tell the school, for a while, almost half of the 5th grade class, was saying something where they needed to go and get analyzed to see if it's, a real risk, or is this, they just want to get out of the classroom, So while that may be the case, I think there's that lack of understanding who you are.
Yeah.
So who are you? Right? And so what is the motive behind the things that you're doing? That needs to be analyzed more than anything, or shared so that kids can understand that their uniqueness makes them cool.
Yeah.
It's not just falling into the category that makes them cool. It's not just having the latest or saying the things that's the hip or whatever else that makes them fit in, that makes them, who they are.
Right.
So, and again, understanding who you are is important. Understanding that your life mission is also important. So all of those factors, so when you're talking to your children, teach them that. I remember reading Desire of Ages and how from a young age, Jesus knew. Why? Because his parents were telling him constantly, John the Baptist, his parents, his parents were telling him, same thing. As parents, let your children know that you were born for greatness. You were born, if God, and by the way, if you have not asked God, what is the purpose for your children? Ask God. He will tell you. Just like he told all the other mothers and all the other parents, he will tell you the purpose for your children. Right? And so that way you can start training them from very young. I really have this hint that God really wants you to go into this. Now they may avoid it, they may not want to, and that's okay. That's okay. But as long as you're training them, it's interesting. Growing up, my parents, I should say, they used to give my older sister things like, stethoscope for my sister, all this medical stuff. Now she's a nurse, and it's interesting how that kind of go along. That the influence always pays off eventually. If anything, they will have the interest. Sometimes we allow children. And I might get caught up on saying this one, but we allow the children to kind of figure out their own lives. You know what I'm saying? And it's not necessarily a bad thing. But what if you can kind of give them the steps after asking God and being aware that they will be really good at, and you start motivating or teaching them in that path. What if? Or you'll see kids like they really love dinosaurs, so the parents go and start buying everything dinosaur. It's like, that's cool, but could there be something else?
Archaeology.
Technology.
Right. I think that there should be a balance between, because there are some parents who just shove down their own dreams down your throat, or all they care about is, I want you to make money in life, and I don't want you to struggle. Right. But then there's also I guess how I've always viewed kids is it's a gift, and God has given you this person to take care of who is going to evolve into something that he's created. And I think that comes with a lot of responsibility, and it's I don't think you should force or tell your child who they should be, but rather do take in, be aware of what they are, what their interests are. Let them try new things. Because I was interested in ballet, tap, and jazz when I was young, but I'm not doing that now. I didn't, have a dream to go to Juilliard and do it, but it was fun to do. I think I learned a lot of lessons from that. I think giving children the space is important.
Give them the space, and also ask God what it is that your children were created for.
Exactly.
Again, he will tell you. You ask him sincerely, and so you can be doing that prayer with your children. Right? Yeah.
And also, I wanted to add to when you talked about how important it is to know yourself. Because I think, especially in this age of horoscopes, I have a friend who follows that just religiously, and we're born in the same month, and so we'd be considered the same zodiac sign. But then like they'd say things like, oh yeah, like I'm this, this, and this. And I'm like, I'm not, like this does not fit me whatsoever. And I just see how easy it is to like
get caught
just,
up.
I need to fit into this.
Yeah.
And then you take on these characters. I see it on the same time with Instagram. There's all these psychologists on there now who are telling you, oh, you have, if you're depressed, you experience all of these symptoms. And then I see people adapting to those symptoms that they didn't have before they read the post. And I'm just like, anybody could forget something, can forget that they put something in the fridge. Like, you know, it's just little things like that. And I'm like, what are we doing at this point? Do we even know how to live our own lives and think for ourselves? Or are we just trusting other people to tell us who we are?
Yeah, we need to be very careful.
Yeah.
The mind is
careful.
powerful.
It is extremely powerful.
And we do react off of suggestions. I mean, television's gotten really good at that, suggesting constant things to you and molding and shaping cultural mindsets, you know?
Yeah, and the most popular thing I'm getting right now is, hey, I think my child needs counseling. And I'm like, for what reason? I don't know. I just make sure that he's okay. I'm like, really? Because everybody's going counseling now. So, you know, it's interesting. It's very interesting. But you're right. We need to be very aware that your children has an individuality, you know, and God has created them that way. And be mindful of all the traps that would take them away from that individuality to create them into something else. Yeah. Right? Very important.
I wonder if do you know of anything that will help parents deal with this? Because counseling is a lot of money, and I feel like sometimes they do it because maybe parents just don't have, some parents don't have the emotional availability or the resources. So is there anything that will help parents able to help their child?
And we'll definitely share about that. But one of the things that I have been, working on with some friends and colleagues of mine is curriculum for parents. Just take it's a book.
Awesome.
Just go through the curriculum with them. Then talk about, the temptation. Talk about the various things that have impacted them, the trauma, their traumas, whatever that trauma might be. It might be someone step on their toe. They don't know how to react. They start, tantruming. Whatever that trauma might be for that kid, you deal with that in a way that you are the one teaching them. Learning and lessons that children can learn now from their parents are invaluable. They will remember those lessons.
Yeah.
They will remember those lessons. Yeah. So going towards that, the media is full of cases now. There was a young lady recently that had committed suicide, and the parents blamed the social media. And they actually won.
Oh, wow.
They did.
Wow.
But it was actually Meta and Pinterest. They apologized.
Wow, Pinterest.
Pinterest.
Just like a picture.
That's what I said.
That's
Well, that's the thing with algorithms now. If you look up one thing, it'll cover your feed with that. So I can imagine if you're seeing I remember, because I was in this space at one point in time where when I was depressed, I literally only got things on my feed that was depressed. I mean,
That's crazy.
it would be things that just completely reinforce how you feel. And it even got to the point that there was this GIF, whatever you want to say. It was like this little moving picture of a train coming towards you, and it was angled at the track, and it said, close your eyes when it gets close enough. And those were things that I was exposed to. There was no positivity. So I can see why they won. They should have won.
So you're bringing up an interesting point here. Like, why is it that you gravitate towards depressive, like in the 80s, Depeche Mode, all those depressive musics that people would always listen to, which seems like it would just put you more in a state of depression.
Yeah.
What is some things that you probably want to avoid anything that's going to even feed that?
I'm just going to go straight to this point because I think this is where we're at. This is extremely important that we're talking about this. If we have time, we can go back into where are we? So whenever situations happen in life, okay, you can call it, i.e. trauma, experiences that's traumatic for one person. The minute we engage into the negative thoughts, the negative actions, the negative whatever that's changing your character negatively, you give the enemy ground to say, have at me. Right? And so what he does, the temptation that he has played on you to engage in that negative thought, now says to him, I'm going to give you my spirit because you're negative right now. The negative spirit then invites, I really believe that, the unkindness, the everything that we read in Galatians 5, right? The even appetite, the increase of appetite. That's a spirit. That's a whole different spirit. He says, this is my spirit. The spirit of unforgiveness.
Interesting.
Right? I truly believe now, I'm not saying that, for those who don't believe in the Bible, but this is what I truly believe, that the spirit comes in, those negative spirits, because you've allowed it in, and those are the cause of all the depression and the level of anxiety that people are having.
So what if, I'm thinking of the young boy who was 1 years old. What if it had nothing to do with you? Or let's say someone who was raped. What if that wasn't your fault?
It's absolutely not their fault.
That's right.
Absolutely not their fault. The experience has nothing to do with it. And it's kind of weird that I'm saying that. It's what happened after the experience. Your thought then becomes negative.
I see.
Your thought then becomes, your action becomes negative. The minute you said, I hate this thing. I hate life. Whatever the negative thoughts that you're having, and more times than not, the thought leads to your emotions, or your emotion leads to your actions, right? Those things, the cycle of those things in your life is what invites that spirit.
But let's say, what if that experience didn't happen? I feel like the experience is connected, because if that experience didn't happen, then maybe that person wouldn't be in that situation.
I will tell you that there are people who never experience anything negative like that, and their mind, because of their thoughts and negative whatever else that they have, still goes into that mindset of depression. I know people who they're like, I don't even know why I'm depressed. Nothing ever happened to me.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here I'm thinking about the person who goes through something traumatic.
Yeah.
And the natural, because we live in a world of sin,
That's right.
is the natural reaction is to have a negative reaction. Like if you get raped, your first mindset isn't going to be like, I'm so glad that happened.
That's right. That's right.
You are because of sin and because of humanity, you're kind of predisposed to have a negative reaction to something.
That's right. That's right. One of the researchers came up and he said this exactly kind of what you're saying. He says, what if depression was not a disease, but a normal response to abnormal life experiences? He's like, what if that's the normal way of going about it? And he's absolutely right. And so what we have to do, we have to be abnormal.
Interesting.
We really have to be abnormal in this world, because naturally, when someone steps on my toe, I want to step on it back. There's back. That's the natural reaction that we have. So the whole idea of, turn the other cheek, that's not no normal stuff. That's the abnormal way.
Going back to Joseph, if your sibling seriously sold you into human trafficking,
I would be petty when they came and asked for the grain.
You know what I'm saying?
Could you react the way that he
so
reacted?
petty.
It
Be like, oh, now you want this.
Exactly.
That would just be me and I would be so caught up in the moment. But he was petty. We do need he was petty when he came against Benjamin. He was petty.
No, he was testing.
Yeah,
it's different. It's different.
I call it pettiness because he has something against that little boy.
I think there's probably something that just to clarify where you're going with this, and that is you're coming on the side of the response to the negative action, not necessarily the feeling that's invoked by the harm that's inflicted. Because that's why I'm clarifying,
the response and the emotions, because sometimes people have bitterness inside and we have no idea.
But I'm still, I go back to that rape case, right?
Right.
And I can't see an instance where anybody walks away from that and they're like, I'm so glad that happened.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. No.
That's what I'm trying to clarify.
No, absolutely not. No.
It's the,
No.
Like your
Not
immediate
justifying
thought
anything. You
is-
never justify. You don't.
that was horrible.
Absolutely horrible.
But you're talking about the response to the events
That is correct.
afterward, not
That is-
necessarily your emotional reaction to that was
You're
bad.
not happy all of a
Yeah,
sudden.
you're not happy all of a
yeah.
So
sudden.
you're saying if a person's
That's all.
willing
That's what I
to,
want to clarify.
Yeah.
so you're
Good
saying
one.
if a
That's one.
person's willing to, after going through that, they deal with it and then are seeking help because they want to
You have
proceed
to-
in life
How to
versus
heal,
staying
from it and
hopeless.
move on.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily move on, because sometimes people
Yeah.
are
It
like
stays.
they can create a life work as a result of it. They can see their purpose as a result of it, right? And so it then gives them a chance to share the gospel message in a way that is unbelievable. I'll give you an example. Now, this is like one of those like far-fetched, and I don't even see myself ever, God forbid anything like that would ever happen to anybody. But it happened to this lady where, her worst nightmare happened. She had a 16-year-old that went to some kind of party, and then she got the call, your son was murdered. It's like, what? She was in her 30s. Long story short, many years later, the guy who did the shooting, he was being let out earlier. I think he served 17 years or something like that because of good behavior. She went to the prison and said, I want him to live with me.
Wow.
We're like,
Yeah, what?
He was like, obviously, these were her words. The forgiveness was for me. It's not for him. And then she goes and talks about how, he obviously did not have the right upbringing. He did not have the love. He didn't understand connection of human that he would do something of that nature. I want to be the one to show him that. Of course, this man's life is now changed and everything else in between. But for her to do something like that, it's beyond the norm. It's beyond the norm. And a lot of us, as Christians, we're called to go beyond the norm. And that's the difference. And I said this before, the Christian life is not an easy one.
Right.
Yeah.
I've mentioned it on this show before. I don't know if you guys have been in the show, but there was a lady who went through the Holocaust. She was part of the Mengele twins that was experimented on. Her twin sister was really heavily experimented on.
Yeah.
And she forgave them.
Yeah.
She literally, after the war, went by and sought out the doctors in Germany, knocked on the door,
crazy.
and said, I forgive you.
Yeah.
You don't understand why you did what you did, but I forgive you. And
Yeah.
she lived a normal life after that.
I think everybody experienced trauma on that.
Yeah, and it was through the
Yeah.
act of forgiveness that helped her heal
That's
this
right.
traumatic experience.
That's
I mean,
right.
I can't even imagine why you would not just come out completely crazy from an experience like that.
Seriously.
And she lived a normal life.
Seriously.
So there's something about the way that you respond after that terrible thing that happens. That's what I feel like that's what you're discussing.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And I have, similar, you were going to say something.
No, I was just thinking about how that's really God's response.
It is.
Yes.
to
It is a
everything that
God
happened.
response.
It is.
It
It's
is.
like, I forgive you.
Yep. It is the God in you. It's only the God in
He's
you that can do
forgiven the
that.
guy that's nailing
Well,
stuff
I
into
mean,
his hands, you know?
not just God and us doing that, but just God's response to humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like he's demonstrating the way forward.
Right.
Like this is how you function.
Yeah.
This is the only way you can
This is the
function.
the only way you can
Yeah.
function.
I think it's crazy too that when someone wrongs you and you do forgive them and express kindness towards them, that also ministers to them because
It
that
does.
changes the person who's
It
forgiven
does.
as well.
It does.
But when you don't, it's just, I don't know, it's just crazy.
And it continues
it's-
the cycle.
Yes, it does.
It does create the
does.
cycle.
And forgiveness is a hard thing to do. It
is.
is a hard
It is.
thing. But
It
yeah, it is
But
necessary.
you feel so much better when
Yeah.
you do.
Yeah.
You feel so much better. Again, it's not the trauma that we're really talking about, like if it's good or bad. Trauma is bad. The
Right.
person that's experiencing is bad. Okay, so that's negative, right? But it's the response to it that really makes the difference in our mental health.
Yeah.
Period. Our response to it makes a whole huge difference.
But it's
So
healthy to be sad. And,
It's very healthy.
okay.
That's a
Yeah.
very
you have to go through
healthy
those emotions,
emotion.
I'm
Yeah,
sure.
okay.
It's a
If
Yeah.
you
very
don't, that
healthy-
might be questionable.
Right. I just want to clarify that because I know just keeping in mind our audience members who may just like have
What's
trouble
going
connecting
on?
with that
Yeah.
and think, oh, well, am I not being positive enough? But just it's
No.
so important to
Yeah.
go through all those emotions.
It is okay. It is
Yeah.
okay to go through these emotions.
Yeah, it's
right?
part of the process.
It is definitely the
Yes.
process. And some people might go through it much quicker than you.
Yeah.
So it's not a level of let's compare. And we're always trying to figure out, well, how long does a person grieve and how long should. That's not what it's about. It's a journey that God is taking somebody on. And again, he's so individualized. He has calculated everything about everyone's life. So while we're looking at this and thinking, what's my scenario? Does it apply to me? It's how is he relating to you in this factor? And one of the things that's important too, God too wants to put his spirit in us. Right? And so the way that he does that, when our thoughts and, our emotions and everything are in line, or we're seeking out his thoughts and emotion through the process, he says, let me give you my spirit, the spirit of love. That's when that whole forgiveness concept just kind of makes so much sense. And then as a result, and science is always also showing it, courage and hope and faith and sympathy, all those starts increasing, even in your health. Even in your health, we're told that healing takes place when gratitude is there, compassion is there, and love is there. There's that restoring power that happens in your body. You've heard of people with cancer in their body, and all of a sudden they start thinking positively and they start seeing things differently, and then tumors are doing certain things. It's like, whoa, what happened, right? So the body and the mind is really connected. We're just one being. We really are just one being. Right?
Have you ever read any of those books that talk about their connection to various different diseases, to various different responses to trauma and things or if somebody's experiencing a lot of anger and always angry in their life, that they tend to have cancer of the bowels?
I have heard that. I mean, I haven't dove into the research to see how true it is based on the clients that I have, but I have heard of that, those studies. And it might be, there might be a lot of validity to that. Might be a lot of it. We do know that the body, the mind, the body follows the mind. It really truly does. Even your hormones, based on how you're thinking, your stress hormones does things, and it's just like, whoa, now, run, stop digestion, and all those sorts of kind of thing that impacts how your body's supposed to do and work as well. So so it boils down to this. John 10 verse 10, the thief come not but to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And that's what he wants to do, but God wants to give us abundant life, right? And so we're talking about resources and so forth. And so one of the things that we've been working on is creating resources for people to really understand the working of this mind. How does the mind really work? And in Quick Guide, we have a book called the Quick Mind Mental Health Guide. Our latest one is called Mental Health Curriculum for Youth. We spend some time on that, and it's chapter by chapter with activities, with stories, with questions to ask the youth. You can do it in format of individual, if you're homeschooling your one kid, or in the church setting and so forth, or even in the schools. If you have time, if there's a counselor there, there's a teacher there that see things that's happening in the classroom, you can get some really good information on how to address the mental health.
Where can they get these? Go
to mindcare.us. Okay. Also, we have a curriculum-based online instruction. So if they want assistance on that, we can also provide that in mentalhealthuniversity.net. So that's us doing some of the demonstrations or teaching with their youth, or they can do it themselves, or they can go there to get some training on how to go about doing it themselves. So we're trying to make all these things available so that no one has any excuses for not addressing mental health in your school, in your home, in your churches, because we're told that not enough of this is being talked about. And as a result, the very battle that we're all under, we're the battle of the mind, we're not winning it. A lot of people are not winning. So we want, to win this battle with Christ. We want to truly win this battle with Christ and using the resources that God has put upon our heart to share.
So it sounds like you need to start a YouTube channel. Do you have a YouTube channel?
That's a good question. We do need to utilize as much more FMP, which is my husband, FMN. What is it? F&D? It's my last name. It's F&D Philistine. So F for France and D for Dana, Philistine is our YouTube page, but we do need to utilize it a little bit much more.
Yeah, you have some great information. So we'll put a link in the description below where you can get a hold of some of these materials, or you want to look into it more. But Dr. Dana, thank you so much for coming by and blessing us with this very intriguing conversation. Do you speak at churches or schools?
We do. We're actually about to go to Pennsylvania next week, and so we're looking for that for this. I think it's called Blue Mountain
Academy.
So we're
very
gonna be
cool.
there
Very
next
cool.
week. me. So yeah.
Well, I think it's a very important topic, and if you are involved in your church or your local school and you want to address some of these topics, please communicate with Dana here. And I think these are very important topics that we need to start sharing light on. And we felt passionate about doing a show in this vein. So please like and subscribe. Share this with anybody that you guys think would get a benefit out of this. Thank you for supporting our channel, for your prayers. We continue to put out content because of the generosity of you guys. So thank you for those of you that have donated to our ministry, and thank you for checking it out.
That's right.
I just want to close with this thought based on everything that you've shared, since it's all about the mind and thought. Jeremiah 29:11, which says, "For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you a future and a hope."
Amen.
Every day is an opportunity to show kindness to the world. Every day is an opportunity to do something that lets someone know you're thinking of them. Every day is an opportunity to give without expecting anything in return. Every day is an opportunity to notice someone in need and to go out of your way to help them. Every day is an opportunity to do one small thing, to show someone you care, to make the world a better place.
Hi, you might not know me because I work mostly behind the scenes. But my name's Michael, and I'm the director of Little Light Studios 3D department. Right now, we're experimenting with new technology where we're trying to blend reality with the virtual world. It's more efficient and offers us the opportunity to make higher quality productions with better visuals. By using the Unreal Engine software, it gives us the possibility to create realistic, virtual environments for sets in a short amount of time. We're working with what we have because we do have financial limits. That's why we're working toward getting an LED wall in the future, because it will allow us to use extended reality. This simply means that we don't need green screen anymore. It will save us tremendous time in the post-compositing process. We will also have realistic, accurate lighting that comes from LED wall, which matches the subject and the set in real time. Actors are able to see the set rather than having to imagine the scenes within the confines of the green screen. So that's what we've been up to here at Little Light Studios. We're so thankful for the ways that God has blessed us, and we're so excited for what He has for us in the future.